Thanks, Pastor. He took my warm-up jokes to start, so now I just have to talk about how I grew this beard to stay warm, and now I'm just sweating a little bit, so yeah, whatever. This series has been really great for me, and my hope is that it has been for you, and I've been grateful for Pastor Keith because I shared this with our elders and our staff this last week, to have a series that truly, we're talking about money, but to have leadership that is able to preach the word where it doesn't feel that way, that there's not this guilt or anything that falls on you so heavily, but that the Spirit can just work through His scriptures to lead and shape us to understand an obedient step in worship, to bring back to the Lord an offering that is worthy, and how awesome that is. And so thank you, Pastor Keith, for your leadership, your preaching and how you've done that. And I'm just excited to continue the series in 2 Corinthians 9 today and dive into an understanding, a continuation of where we were a few weeks ago in 2 Corinthians 8. Of where Paul's leading the church, helping them understand a commitment that they've made and then following through with that out of obedience and worship, not out of anything else. So would you guys do me a quick favor? Let's stand up in reverence of the reading of God's word, and I'm just going to read all the way through chapter 9 together. And it'll be on the screens if you have your devices, your Bibles, whatever it may be. Starting in verse 1. Now it is superfluous for me to write to you about the ministry for the saints, for I know your readiness, of which I boast about you to the people of Macedonia, saying that Achaia had been ready since last year, and your zeal has stirred up most of them. But I am sending the brothers so that our boasting about you may not prove empty in this matter, so that you may be ready, as I said you would be. Otherwise, if some Macedonians come with me and find that you are not ready, we would be humiliated, to say nothing of you for being so confident. So I thought it necessary to urge the brothers to go on ahead to you and arrange in advance the gift you have promised, so that it may be ready as a willing gift, not as an exaction. The point is this: whoever sows sparingly will also reap sparingly, and whoever sows bountifully will also reap bountifully. Each one must give as he has decided in his heart, not reluctantly or under compulsion, for God loves a cheerful giver. And God is able to make all grace abound to you, so that having all sufficiency in all things at all times, you may abound in every good work. As it is written, He has distributed freely. He has given to the poor. His righteousness endures forever. He who supplies seed to the sower and bread for food will supply and multiply your seed for sowing and increase the harvest of your righteousness. You will be enriched in every way, to be generous in every way, which through us will produce thanksgiving to God. For the ministry of this service is not only supplying the needs of the saints, but it is also overflowing in many thanksgivings to God. By their approval of the service, they will glorify God because of your submission that comes from your confession of the gospel of Christ, and the generosity of your contribution for them, for all the others, while they long for you and pray for you because of the surpassing grace of God upon you. Thanks be to God for His inexpressible gift. You guys can have a seat. The framework of this whole chapter is Paul going back to the Corinthians and talking about a gift, an offering that he has asked of these churches to support the persecuted church in Jerusalem. And so as they've been rallying around this together, he's reminding the Corinthian church, because here's what has happened. The Corinthian church was encouraged by this. Like, we want to be a part of this. We see something here that Paul is leading us towards, so we're going to jump all in. And because of their enthusiasm, the Macedonians heard about it, and the Macedonians went all in. And they brought an offering with incredible generosity. You've heard us preach about that over the last few weeks. An incredible generosity to come from these people. So now Paul is aware of the Corinthians were all in. They were like, hey, we're going to do this. We're making this commitment. But yet they had not given anything as of yet. But the Macedonians have poured out this offering. And so they've boasted. Paul has boasted about the Corinthian church. And he's like, I don't want you guys to be embarrassed. I don't want to get there. I don't want to get to the place where I've got to pull it out of you or tackle you and pull your wallet out of your purse or whatever it may be. I want you to give willingly. I want you to continue to see that this incredible thing that God is doing, that we get to be a part of that movement. So be prepared, because we're going to come and we're going to celebrate together. And we don't want that celebration to get lost in a forgetfulness or in an unpreparedness in you. And so he's reminding them throughout this chapter of what's to come, and he's encouraging them once again of the results of being obedient and worshipful with your offering before the Lord, which is incredibly powerful. And so he sets up in these first 5 verses that you've been leading into this. This has been coming, and I don't want you to be thrown off, and I don't want to be thrown off. I want us to all be together so that our focus is the celebration of the offering with what God is doing, not in our forgetfulness. And he leads into this in the last verse in chapter 5. It's like, we want you to be ready with a willing gift. A willing gift. We don't want to exact a call from you to have to give in the moment. We don't want that embarrassment to come. And so he's calling the Corinthian church to want to remember the promise that you've made. Remember that we've talked about this. I read some scholars saying that this chapter could have been the forgotten chapter, left out because he's already talked about it. He's bringing back up something he's already had a conversation about. But he wants the Corinthian church to remember what you get to be a part of. Remember who you are. Remember the work of Christ in you. And then plan ahead because of what God's going to do through the church, for his glory. And then give wholeheartedly, give cheerfully, we'll talk about in a minute. Give with everything that you have, not out of exaction, but out of worship, out of an offering to be a part of something that is so much bigger than you are. But together we get to see the fruit, the bountiful fruit of God's work in that. And he's leading us to understand these things, and he wants to develop that conversation a little bit more. So we jump into verse 6. So let's talk about breeding, which I know is super weird in many respects. When you think this passage, like, what does breeding have to do with it? Because when I think of breeding, I think of dogs. Anyone else? Yeah? So this word kind of came to me as I was preparing and studying, and it's just the idea that you see something that is good, a character trait or a style or something that is just such a good, rich thing that you want to multiply it. And so what you do is you bring all the parts together, all the pieces together into the same place, and you intentionally mix them to multiply them. And this idea of breeding can come out. It's like, hey, we want this generosity to breed more generosity. We want to take the beauty of the generosity of the church, and we want to see it expounded and multiplied upon. So this idea, and we've said this phrase before, that generosity breeds generosity. That there's a little bit of fun competition to this. That we're driven, we're led by one another. That we're energized by the corporation of the church coming together, saying, hey, we're all in this together because of what Christ has done for us. We're going to join forces together, and we're going to watch what God will do through it. Our generosity breeds generosity. And there's a powerful point in this because you think about this, and you understand that if we can move someone else to a place of obedience and worship through this way, there's God adding to the fruit of your generosity. That when one can give, that could lead and encourage and move someone else to give and to be a part of that, creating this worshiping community together. It's this idea in verse 6 that the principle of sowing and reaping, that you who sow sparingly will reap sparingly. What you put into it, you're going to get out of it. Well, those who sow bountifully will also reap bountifully. And then you jump down to verse 10. As he who supplies the seed to the sower and the bread for food will supply and multiply your seed for sowing and increase the harvest of your righteousness. Paul's reminding the church that there's a developing purpose around this offering. And yes, this particular offering is going to the persecuted church in Jerusalem. But there's a greater purpose at work here. There's something that we get to be a part of. And when we give to that, God, in his unbelievable way, will move in the hearts of the people around him. He will bountifully bring a response. He's the greatest giver. He's the one that gives all things out for the church, for his glory. He wants to see this offering multiply and expound because he wants to minister and care for his church. He loves his church. He is the greatest giver. So whatever we can bring, he's going to do that much and more because he's God and he loves his church that much. Romans 8:32. He who did not spare his own son but gave him up for all of us, how will he not also with him graciously give us all things? God will always outgive you. He will always outgive the church. And it shows in the greatest possible gift, an inexpressible gift, Paul writes at the end of the chapter, of giving his son. The most incredible sacrifice he could have offered, the biggest offering, the most incredible offering he could have brought to the table, he brought. Because he wants to see people's lives changed for his glory, his kingdom come. He wants to be a part of that. And here's the beauty of it, church. He wants to be a part of that with you. Does God have the ability to do it all on his own? Yes, he does. Does he have the ability to provide everything anybody ever needed on his own? He does. But how incredible is it? How beautiful is it that he looks at us and he says, I want you to be a part of it with me. How amazing is it that he says, I want to give to you bountifully so that as you return that, I'm going to multiply it and we get to see incredible things happen together. God's not a far-off God who doesn't want to be involved in your lives and doesn't want you to be involved in his plan. He wants the involvement. He's craving it so much so that he sent his son to redeem you, to forgive you of your sin, to bring you into a holy relationship with him so that you can participate with him in his kingdom coming. Let's just pause on that moment right there and go, that's enough. That's the kind of generosity breeding generosity that I want to be part of. That's the kind of motivation that I want to jump in on and say, if God, you are so big and you care enough about me, you love me enough that you want me to be a part of what you're doing, but I don't have it all together. If this is about money, then my finances are a mess. I don't even know I'm doing a good job at managing them. But yet he still looks at you and he brings this forgiveness and this beauty of relationship to you. And he works through this transforming work in you. And it's coming with a gift that is willing and grateful and cheerful to him and allowing him to do his part to bountifully multiply that for the glory of his church. And so as Paul encourages the Corinthian church to do this, he's leaning more. And he comes into verse 7 and he says, it's really a heart issue here. For each one must give as he has decided in his heart, not reluctantly or under compulsion. It's not about, I don't really know. He doesn't want you to stress. I'm like, all right, I'll just do what I can and throw it in the plate and not really want to do it. He doesn't want you to give in a way it's because, Pastor Keith and Pastor Jason got up here and says, we need your money. This is what it's about. That's not our hearts, nor is it his. He does not want that for you. He wants you to be a cheerful giver. And this word cheerful is great. Because in the Greek, the word is hilaros or hilaron. And it translates in English to our word hilarious. So imagine if we all gave in that way. Like, if you ever had that moment where you just laugh so hard and you can't control it? My 13-year-old daughter does this. She's not in the room, is she? Am I talking about her and she's in the room? Her friends are. Don't tell her I said this. If I can get her laughing, she laughs uncontrollably. She gets to the point that she just can't stop laughing, and then I can say words like radish, and it just makes her laugh more. Right? You can just bring up the most ridiculous things because she's already in that motion just of hilariousness that is going on, and she just loses it. And I imagine that picture. What if that was the way we worshiped and we just gave ourselves to God? Like, God, I'm not ashamed of my response. I'm just going to give everything over to you. Even if the world doesn't quite understand it. Even if the world doesn't say, like, what is happening here? That I just want to give my full outward expression over to you. in obedience and worship as an offering to you. And when we apply that thought to how we give, that it's an expression, not a compulsion. It's how we just freely say, God, I want to be a part of this. I am all in. I cannot stop being a part of your kingdom work. I have to do this. And it's just something that grows upon and grows, and it just gets better and greater along the way. And it doesn't mean it's just always hard, because if you laugh that hard, it hurts, right? Like you literally hear that, like it laughs to your stomach hurts, your cheeks hurt. But you just get so involved and invested into the kingdom work that you just want to do more. And as God is seeing that purpose in you, He's multiplying it. And here's the beautiful thing. He's going to surround you with more so that you can continue to be a part of His kingdom move more. Now, that does not mean that if you give $100, He's going to give you 1,000. That does not mean that He's going to take the change and multiply it into bills. He's going to give fruit around you that is abundant and beyond anything you can ask or imagine. But what He wants you to do with that is bring that back as an offering. Lord, I have this because of who you are. I have this because you are the one multiplying it, whatever it may be. And let's just say He does bless you financially. What is the blessing for? His kingdom work. And there's the challenge. Because too often times we think, if I have more money, my living ways are going to grow and happen to this. What if that thought changed and we have found so much joy in the kingdom work of God and what He's blessed us with that we just can't help ourselves but give it all back to Him, knowing that He's got our backs, that He's going to provide for us every step of the way, and we never have to worry because He has already given so much to us. Even with our Pastor Keith led us to understand kind of the idea of wealth globally and where we sit in our community. What would it look like if the church in America alone gave to such a point of cheer that we looked at everything we had and said, God, it is all yours. Even the Church of Jerusalem in Acts 2, they pooled everything together and said, hey, we're going to give completely to the work of the church. We're going to share everything together so that the gospel can be multiplied through us, that we can care for one another for the glory of God. And we gave bountifully and joyfully in that way. And that joy comes out of this act of service. He uses in verse 12. He calls it an act of service. It's ministry of the service. It's supplying for the needs of the saints. It's going towards the people that are serving and leading the church, but it's more so and also for the overflowing of thanksgiving to God, of worship. And I love this idea of service because it's sent as a priestly act. It's a public in nature. It's a public function, a spiritual offering of submission, a spiritual offering of supplication on behalf of others. And so a Levitical priest, they would take the offering that people would bring to the temple. And on their behalf, they would take that through and walk it through the process, offering up prayers to God, leading to the high priest moving into the holiest of holies and asking for God's grace and mercy upon His people. When we bring an offering, when we participate in this ministry of service, we're doing the same thing. It's not about the dollar amount, but it's about the expression, the outward expression of joy on behalf of the kingdom work in God's church. That we bring this offering and say, Lord, I'm bringing it for you because I want to see and know the stories that you're going to multiply for your gospel in the church. I want to see people globally transformed by the message of Jesus and the love and the hope that comes through Him. So when you bring an offering, when you bring it willingly with cheerful heart, you're asking God, here's everything I have. Do greater things than I've ever asked or imagined, Lord. And thank you. Thank you for letting me be a part of this work.